Well, Phil, that was Marianne Williamson. Always great to have her on the show. Tremendously dynamic, a very deeply spiritual person. Her background in Course of Miracles, but extremely active in the world, obviously, and has an agenda for politics, making it more sacred and more spiritual, and it seems pretty timely to me.
Yeah, and she's such an important voice, and the most articulate and eloquent voice for this intersection of spirituality and social activism, and an indispensable voice as far
Yeah.
as I'm
Who? Yeah,
concerned.
you had mentioned a couple of people that are going to be speaking at the conference, a couple of whom we've had on the show. Why don't you let our listeners know a little bit about who they are?
Well, from the list I see on the Sister Giant website, the only one we've had on the show, other than Marianne, is Andrew Harvey, who's the sort of male equivalent of a passionate spiritual activist, and
Hmm.
also eloquent and fiery in his conviction. But they also have Robert Thurman, the well-known Buddhist scholar and friend of the Dalai Lama. I see Gene Houston. I see.
Dennis Kucinich.
Yes, I was going to say there are Michael Lerner, the rabbi,
Hmm.
progressive rabbi from San Francisco. I also see names associated more with politics, like Dennis Kucinich and Tom Hartman, the journalist, Alan Grayson, the congressman, and Ari Berman, who has a journalist who's done wonderful work on voter suppression, and others.
Yeah, she's partnering up with Derek Jenkins Harkins. Is that his name? He's the Phil. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought I
Derek
lost you for a
Harkins.
second there. Yeah, I'm less familiar with him, and but he's at the Union Theological Seminary in New
Yeah,
York.
it says he's the senior vice president at Union Theological Seminary, which is a really eminent uh, school in New York, and a former senior pastor at a Baptist church, I see, and director of Faith Outreach for the Democratic Party,
Right,
and advisor to President Obama.
right,
So a very formidable guy.
right. Well, I mentioned during the interview, and I want to ask you about it now. I know. I mean, I was at a talk that Marianne gave in support of Bernie Sanders. There were about 800 people there last April, and one guy got up and at the end and he said, Marianne, you should just stick to spirituality. I don't know why you get involved in politics, and she really let him have it. She had a very strong answer. But I
I
know,
don't
Phil. I
doubt
mean,
it
doesn't
for a
that happen to you?
second.
Don't people say to you the same thing? Hey, you wrote this book about
Yes,
Ayurveda. You're writing about spirituality. You're blogging about spirituality. Why dirty your hands in politics?
yes, and especially people who come from the sort of non-dual school of spirituality, who
Hmm.
think. Well, there's two kinds of people I run into. One is the people who think um, the spiritual technologies, especially meditation, and in some circles, right thinking and prayer, that those are sufficiently powerful that if we do them, we can affect the kind, change in the world. And then there are the people who feel it's beneath a spiritual teacher or author or something like that to get involved in muddy stuff like politics, and our only real important job is to remind people about the unity of all beings, and the ultimate nature of the self and consciousness, and why get mired in this illusory world of Maya. So I've run into both of those, and I wrote a piece for Spirituality and Health for my column where I said something like spirituality is not to be confused with complacency and indifference.
Right, right, and I get it from the other side sometimes. that some people associate me with politics because I had a lot in my radio show. I've had a lot of political leaders on. I did a show with Ari Berman calling politic picking with Ari, and I have an affiliation with the or had an affiliation with the Kennedy School of Government. So people will say, "Why? What's this spiritual? You're doing a podcast on contemporary spirituality. Why?" Well, my answer is always without delving in deeply spiritually, you're going to have a political system that's in shambles, and one could argue that that's becoming more apparent as each day passes. So yeah, I think, and we've discovered and discussed this a number of times on the show, as people go in deeply spiritually, especially if what they're doing in terms of their spiritual practice is effective, they eventually, if not right from the beginning, look out and think, what can I do to make a better world?
Well, most people do at some point, but there's, it's a strange thing, but some people make a distinction between politics, electoral politics, and other kinds of engagement. So they're perfectly happy to see spiritual people do service work and help the poor and write a check or, advocate for better health care or whatever, issue-oriented thing, or for better, more sane prison system, whatever it is. But something about politics, and especially when it comes to elections, they somehow draw some distinction there, and I don't get it.
Right.
Personally. But.
Yeah. I want to also mention for our listeners that don't know this, Marianne a few years ago ran for political office, ran for U.S. Congress as an independent in the Brentwood, Los Angeles
No,
area.
not Brent. No, it was a different part of. Well, it may have included
because
Brentwood.
I think that where she was living at the time.
But it was her district ended a few blocks from where I live, so I couldn't vote for her.
Yeah, and I think that she's still very involved politically, but I think she's done with running at least for a while.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that came out of her campaign was how difficult it is to run as an independent, how the two-party system really has a lock on things. So and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
But what she did, I think, is a good example because if people care about their communities and the impact that elected officials can have on human life and human suffering, we have to think locally as well as just every 4 years who's going to be president. And by running for Congress, Marianne, I think, set a very good example of that I hope other people follow. And if I were 20 years younger, I might.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Somebody's got to pick it up.
Everybody has their own destiny and their own dharma. And, some of us are called to speak out. I love the expression she has there, people who sit should also take a stand.
Yeah.
And that's
and then you think,
it's not for everybody. Obviously, some people are content to just focus on their spiritual lives and the world of their families and their local concerns, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just some of us want to speak out as well.
Right, and I think in the world today, have Pope Francis has given. Caused a lot of people to reflect on that because he's making statements that affect how politicians could and should be behaving, and I think it's embraced by many people, but also upsets a lot of people as well. I've heard a lot of conservative Catholics say, he should just stick to being a pope and spiritual things and stay out of the things of the world, and that's baloney because obviously the two are. Live together, or materialism lives within spirituality.
And everybody, there's so much unintentional hypocrisy around these things. Progressives are often react against the evangelical activists and say, "Oh, you should keep religion out of politics." but they wouldn't have said that to Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King.
Right.
And so,
Right.
and the same thing happens.
Or the Dalai Lama, for that matter. I mean,
That's
he's a
right.
political
That's right.
he's in political exile, and fighting for the rights of his
And so
people.
I'm sure the conservative Catholics who object to Pope Francis's engagement have no problem with the church speaking up about issues like abortion or
Mhm.
the death penalty or something like that. That's okay in their agenda.
Hmm. Well, we'll keep focusing on this as time goes on and bring in other speakers to discuss these issues. And again, the conference that Marianne's putting on, the information can be found at sistergiant.com at that website. And you can always check in with us at spiritmatterstalk.com. Spread the word, let people know about our podcast and the programming that we're doing. And please email us or contact us in any way, shape, or form that you can. We also have a Facebook page. We're on Twitter, in all areas of social media, and give us feedback and suggestions. It is always greatly appreciated.
Yep. Even if you disagree.
Yeah, even if you disagree. But please do it nicely, because Phil and I are very sensitive. All right,
All
over
right,
and
Dennis.
out.
Bye bye.